Hello, lovely people. There's quite a few of you now, which is exciting. Welcome aboard, or whatever. Today we're talking about Bachelor Mother from 1939. This one stars Ginger Rogers, David Niven, and Charles Coburn is in there as well, and it was directed by Garson Kanin, that's with a K. So this one was actually remade in 1956 as Bundle of Joy, starring Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher. And it was also remade as a Bollywood film later than that, again. And it's also was kind of, I'm not going to say stolen, but it was kind of lifted from a Hungarian film that wasn't shown in the US. And so it was rewritten for the American market and kind of sold as an original film or an original idea, you know. Yeah, so it's about a girl called Polly Parrish. She's a shop girl played by Ginger Rogers, the woman who can do pretty much everything better than you, backwards and in heels. So she's hired as Christmas staff, and when she's walking home, sadly, at the end of the season, she's given her sort of like leaving papers because the Christmas season's over, there's no more work, and she sees a woman abandoning a little baby on an orphanage doorstep. So as she kind of observes this and goes over, she's pulled into the whole situation and at once mistaken as the actual mother by the staff of the orphanage, and soon everyone believes she's just had a baby on her own, you know, outside of marriage or whatever. And it kind of makes me laugh because I'm like, she never would have, like, in the real world, outside of the movie world in the modern era, obviously if she'd had a baby, she would have had you know, cravings and or whatever, and a belly and like different things, right? So I was like, how would they not have noticed that she wasn't pregnant? But then I was like, of course, because children were, in the 1930s, delivered by stork. And people didn't talk about birth. So I guess that's kind of the idea. So anyway, this situation leads to the charming but irresponsible son of the department store manager, called David, played by David Niven. He gets her job back at the store to help her keep the baby. And then his father, the owner of the department store, comes to believe that the child is his grandson, and there's a bunch of other sort of mistaken identity, mistake sort of things along the way as well. The whole time she's insisting that she's not the mother, and everyone just ignores her. So that's kind of like the running joke of the film as well. So Ginger Rogers and David Niven have a very natural, playful chemistry, and it's all very lighthearted, which really belies the subject matter. So this film is, what year are we in? 1939. This is the sort of end of the Great Depression in the US and obviously other places as well. A huge number of children were abandoned outside orphanages. Like, I mean, I took a look at the numbers and I saw anything from 30,000 to 200,000 just children where their parents couldn't take care of them. So you'll kind of see this in 1930s films sometimes where, or even earlier and later than that, but movies of this time period were an escape for people. So sometimes they did reflect like real sad things that people would maybe see in the newspaper or know about from their own experience or whatever, and it turned them on their head to have a happy ending or a reversal of fortune. So in this film there's actually kind of a Cinderella moment, for example, as well. So yeah, these films were often very witty, sometimes had sort of music and dancing or things like that. So that's kind of where we're at. It's kind of a screwball style comedy. We've talked about screwball before. Ginger Rogers is absolutely delightful in this film for her ability to just nail those one-liners, and she does it with just the right arch but throwaway air that works really well for this film. In contrast, David Niven is much more sort of energetic and suave, which is a really great sort of a different energy, and it kind of matches up really well. A couple of favorite scenes for you guys. My favorite is the New Year's scene where Rogers is made to pretend to be Swedish. So she gets asked to a dance by David Niven, and I can't remember why, but she ends up pretending to be Swedish for the scene. And so David Niven's character kind of jilted someone for the evening, so she's jealous and makes fun of Ginger Rogers' character, Polly, not realizing that Polly can actually understand every word till the end of the scene. And it's just really lots of people bouncing off each other, and it's really a good scene. There's also a scene where Niven's character David mansplains parenting to Polly, which feels interesting. It's a very domestic conversation, and I think parents today, or mothers more specifically, will relate to it like almost 100 years later. David brings over a baby manual sort of book and he's read it himself, and he says, women just make up that it's hard to deal with a baby, and then it's kind of, you kind of get where that's going, but it's a good little scene. So the director of this film, Garson, Kanin, I hadn't really heard of him before, so this was kind of fun for me. He directed this. As I said, it was, adapted from a Hungarian film that wasn't shown in the US. Kanin actually dropped out of high school in the 1930s to help financially support his family. And he did a lot of things. Well, he worked as a director. He was an actor some of the time, and he also did some work on Broadway. I think he may have won a Tony Award, but he's best known as a writer, predominantly. Perhaps best well known for writing Adam's Rib or directing A Man to Remember. So that is him. Ginger Rogers, always fun to talk about her. She's probably best remembered now as the beautiful woman who was paired up as the love interest and dance partner of Fred Astaire in several popular films in the 30s, though her career was much longer than that. She's also the Oscar-winning actress in Kitty Foyle, which came out in 1940, so just a little bit later than this. And following her Oscar win, she became one of the highest paid actresses in Hollywood. So that's who she is, but she's a really good actress. It's nice to see her in movies like Top Hat, but also in movies like this where she gets to show more of her range, because she was really quite good. She can pull on the heartstrings a little bit, she can dance, she can be very funny. So I really like her in this movie. Little side note about her, because we love those. She was a member of the DAR, if you guys know what that is. And she was outspoken about not being impressed by Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. So yeah, there's a little bit of a tangent for you guys, but there were these books that came out as, I guess, studio merchandise kind of thing, and they were mysteries in the Nancy Drew kind of style mode, and the main character in it was a studio star. So there's Judy Garland, I think there's a Cary Grant one, and it's just Judy Garland solves a mystery. And there's a Ginger Rogers one, and her mother wrote it. So it's kind of a random side note, but there was a whole bunch of these books, and they have these great illustrations. It's very much the line drawing style of the time, which I love. I actually have a few of them. I think I have 3 or 4 of the different ones, and I think they're kind of wonderful because they're just so of their time, and so such a thing that a studio of that period would produce, and everyone kind of had these ideas about that the studio produced, these kind of ideas about who these famous people were, and they created a persona for them. And I just think it's kind of very just an intriguing concept. But yeah, I just thought it was neat that Ginger Rogers' own mother wrote her one. They were quite close. David Niven plays David, the playboy and love interest. That was originally meant to be played by either Cary Grant, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., a few other people, those guys were attached to RKO, but Niven was eventually borrowed from Samuel Goldwyn. So I don't know if I've talked about this before. I probably have, but stars were attached to a studio at the time and would generally only appear in films from that studio, and often played sort of similar characters, at least at this stage. So yeah, Dave Niven was a British actor. He won an Oscar for his role in Separate Tables in 1958. He was, I should say, in loads of things. He's in some of the Pink Panther movies. And if anybody's seen the old Casino Royale James Bond movie, it's kind of a spoof. He's in that as well. Loads of other things. He wrote a few books, some fiction, some non-fiction. He's quite interesting. He's a bit of a rake, generally speaking. He claimed to have an affair with Princess Margaret, although this is unsubstantiated. But yeah, he was definitely a playboy kind of a guy. Yeah, his first wife, there's an interesting story there. Her name was Primula, and she was English as well, and she died. They went to a star-studded Hollywood party like a few weeks after they moved to the US, and she was at Tyrone Power's house, and they were playing a game of sardines, which is like everyone hides in one place, and then one person's like it, and you switch the lights off, and the one person has to find everyone in the dark, loosely speaking. I probably didn't explain that very well. Anyway, she opened a door in his house thinking it was a closet, and it was actually a basement, and so she fell down a flight of stairs, and she died. So it's very sad. She had a couple of infant children at the time. So yeah, I think it's an intriguing story, not just because it's tragic and maybe explains some of David Niven's kind of womanizing type behavior, but also because some of these Hollywood parties were just insane, and a lot of things were covered up and things like that. So sometimes with stories like this, I don't know about this story specifically, I'm not casting any aspersions on anyone, but things could go very wrong at a Hollywood party, and sometimes it would be covered up and stuff like that. So it's always intriguing to hear some of these stories, to me anyway. But yeah, he was, as I kind of mentioned, David Niven was, I don't know, I guess I called him a rake, I'll stick with that. But he was good friends and roommate at one time with Errol Flynn, which is pretty telling. Errol Flynn was a real handful. He was basically, like, there was a few of them that were really good friends, and they were really debauched. Like, they would, like, really heavy drinking, but also drug use, sleeping with underage girls, voyeurism, like all kinds of, they get up to all kinds of kinky stuff. And I'll save some of those kind of stories more for if we talk about a Errol Flynn movie. But he and Errol Flynn both had that suave, slick, heartthrob kind of thing outwardly, and then weren't so squeaky clean behind the scenes. So that's something that, for me personally, whenever I watch a Niven film, he's such a good performer, and sometimes he plays these playboy kind of slick kind of roles, but to me, I always just see this guy who, it doesn't ruin the film for me, obviously, but it's like, I always kind of have that in mind, that he's very charming and very, I don't want to say like not so nice, but I've had some stories about what these guys used to get up to, and it wasn't anything to be proud of. I don't know. So anyway, that is Bachelor Mother. It's a really good fun film with lots of like different crazy sort of things going on. It's well worth a watch. It's obviously the sort of unwed mother thing is maybe a little bit dated, depending on where you live in the world, I guess, because in some places that's more socially acceptable now than it was at the time. So it's kind of an interesting, odd little film. So a little special mention. I think the woman who plays Gladys Kravitz is in this film for a moment. I saw her and she has like one line and I was like, is that her? So if you know, then you know, but I couldn't find any evidence that it definitely was her. Yeah, and finally, I guess the hats in this film, if you're a kind of fashion person or somebody who loves vintage stuff, the hats in this film, you could watch it for the hats alone. It's just lovely. There's a few where I was like, we really have to bring back hats because they keep your head warm. They're so stylish. And I mean, if you're having a bad hair day, there's nothing like a hat. Also, Polly has a quite cute little retro. Obviously, it wasn't retro in the context of the film, but for now, like a retro apartment. And there were a few little things where I was like, that is so nice. So those are two little sort of things to look out for if you watch the film. And yeah, that is Bachelor Mother from 1939. Yeah, and thank you for watching. And I'll be posting a little bit more consistently going forward again, because I have been a little bit absent lately. I had all 4 of my wisdom teeth out, which was a bit of an adventure. And yeah, so we should be a bit more on track now, but that's kind of it.